Hello and welcome to the Southbound Sports Show. I'm your host, Richie Leahy, here with my co-host, Maddie B, kicking live right after Miami blew their game against the Oklahoma State Cowboys and Mike Gundy. Which, do you think Mike Gundy should be on the hot seat at all?
Well, he just won his bowl game.
But
fine.
winning a bowl game is something different. I mean, like, the guy, has he ever done above and beyond and won the conference or anything? That 1 year, maybe?
But he's at Oklahoma State. What is the bar set at for that program? You know, when I look at a program like that, like, do you really see them having the talent to consistently upend the Oklahomas and the Texases?
Well, isn't it his job to recruit that level? I mean, Baylor was in a better position than he's been.
You could argue that, but also they had a pile of scandals and things with that too.
That's true. I know you're a fan of most of Baylor's coaches, so
easy.
Bringing up scandals. Your man, you freeze. We'll get into that in a little bit here. Kicking off the NFL part of the show, the Steelers are taking my advice, dude. They're finally resting Ben Roethlisberger after clinching the AFC North. I think they might have did that a week before. But right now, this game has big playoff implications, and I'm wondering if they're resting Roethlisberger on purpose. Because right now the Browns, they lead the Colts in the tiebreaker, and the other team would be the Ravens. So Ravens are 6, Browns are 7, how it would fall. The Ravens, I think they're probably going to be in. They're playing the Bengals. And, I mean, the Bengals haven't been good. They need a win to get in. Then the Browns need a win as well, because if the Colts win their game, they would be jumped. And it might mess up the seeding. The Colts play the Jaguars, another awful team. So if the Steelers beat the Browns, you could say going into this week, there's a good chance that they're out. They're the odd man out. The Raiders got eliminated. Their best finish could be 500. But you have 8 teams in the AFC right now with 10 wins, which is outrageous. Because on the NFC side, you're going to get a team from the NFC East with a major losing record. Right now, the leader is Washington at 400 winning percentage. Like, Tony Gwynn almost had a better chance for a hit than the NFC East had for a win. So that's my thing. I wonder if this is strategic, because you played the Colts, took a comeback to get that win. Roethlisberger came out, and so now they're like, hey, if we beat the Browns, great. If not, now, realistically, they're not going to end up playing. The Steelers aren't going to play that team. My best case scenario, I would want to see the Ravens win, the Browns, whatever happens to them. I mean, it would be ideal if the Colts and the Browns both lost, to put Miami in that spot to play the Steelers. Because right now, Buffalo has the head-to-head, and if they lose, the Steelers could potentially be the number 2. If the Steelers aren't playing Roethlisberger, though, it looks like they're probably, let's just put them in at 3, because the Bills played so good this week, and they just beat the Patriots, so they're going to be up against the Dolphins. So that could play into seeding here. If the Bills beat the Dolphins, that most likely could be the Steelers matchup. And I think that that's a good matchup for them, because you have athletic defense. The Dolphins haven't been consistent on offense. They've been bouncing around between quarterbacks. Some of their weapons have been injured. I would think that that's going to be I would rather play them than, like, let's be honest, play the Ravens. Because you don't want to play a rival that already hates you. You've beaten in the regular season, and you're going to go ahead and give them a third crack at you, because the Steelers, they beat the Ravens, was it twice this year already? Yeah, they beat them twice. It's hard to beat a team 3 times in a season. So I don't want to get into a scenario where Steelers make the playoffs. Oh no, here it is, the Ravens. Ravens finally beat them, and that's it for Ben Roethlisberger. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I can kind of see that. And I think resting Roethlisberger is the right move, just from a standpoint that Pittsburgh's playoff hopes are going to go as far as his arm takes him. And I felt like there were some of the throws that he made on Sunday that he looked good. It didn't look like it was painful coming out, and he was actually able to throw some deeper passes. And even the commentators were saying, well, it looks like he's able to throw it a little bit deeper. I think he has to, because there's no run game right now to support them, and they can't just keep throwing everything short, because what ends up happening is you throw short and then you have no run game, and all it does is it puts everyone into the box that then it takes those chances away. And the only way that you overcome that pressure is by going over the top and being able to consistently do that. It was nice to see them not dropping as many passes, although I would have liked to have seen them, maybe not let themselves get into such a deep hole before deciding to show up and start to play. I think one of the things that playing in a pandemic season really hurts Pittsburgh is, I think they're at somewhat of a disadvantage because they don't have that opportunity to play in front of the home crowd. And I wondered how much these last couple weeks have been affected by them not having having fans in the stands that would normally be going crazy both at home and on the road to support them.
And that's one thing that I'm not really sure if it's going to make a difference in the playoffs. It was weird, and it was something that reminded me watching the game on Sunday that I thought, this seems like the Steelers should have urgency coming back, but it didn't feel like that at home, because you didn't have the crowd. I know they're like piping some of the crowd noise in and stuff, but it's just not there. And so sitting at home, like, you can feel the difference. So the players have to feel the difference.
Yeah.
Because even just playing sports through like high school and college, like if there was a crowd there, you knew going to spring training in college and playing in Florida when there was like almost no crowd, it was almost just like a glorified practice compared to if you had fans in the stands. Like, it's just a different feel. So in the NFL, I feel like that's magnified by 100,000 or however many people are in that stadium. And so you're going to know how that feels just on the game. I do wonder how much some of like the indoor teams would feel the difference. Like if the Colts were to make it, and they have to travel to like Buffalo and play out in the snow, like that might put something on it because you're not used to it. You're not practicing in it. That's not your home stadium. I could see some teams like that. The other one would be the Saints. Like, are they going to feel it? Because that's one of the things that I would look for, trying to point out just different matchups. You have some of the things coming in. There's not going to be that many crowd differences, I would think. Some stadiums are letting like half in. Like the Chiefs have been doing a pretty good job of letting people in. And like, I hope that's the one thing that doesn't end up hurting the Steelers this postseason. But I think it's going to be different for each team. The indoor ones going outdoors with no fans, and you don't have that to hype you up. Because I think that's one of the things that a lot of people miss. You're packing like tens of thousands of people into a stadium. There's going to be some extra warmth element from that. Just having everyone close, moving around. The players are going to be hyped up from that. Without that, you're kind of just in a cold, empty stadium. I feel like you're going to feel that as a player. And that's just going by my gut. So, I don't know.
The Rooney family would never do this, but I think it would be almost comical to just say, well, for the playoffs, we're just going to treat it like the Rose Bowl, and we're going to go somewhere where we can have our fans. And just know that Pittsburgh travels so well. Just be like, all right, well, we'll find a warm weather state where there is a home crowd. Just be like, all right, this is where we're playing our games now. And just ride it out.
Well, look in L.A. They would probably love it. I mean, they traveled well whenever they played, like, was it the Chargers or the Raiders there a few years ago? It was mostly Steelers fans. And so, I mean, they could probably do it. But LA is not going to have fans either. So you're right. You're going to have to find a place that does have fans and is able to make a difference. But Like, I don't think they would do that. It would be cool if they did, but they probably more like, let's keep our guys in the same facilities, because at some point you don't want to bank on that and turning it into like a neutral site game. Take some of that familiarity out of it. And I think like your Rose Bowl comparison would be good for that same reason. And remind me to talk about the Rose Bowl and stuff. I'll get into the College Bowl stuff because I want to get to your thoughts on some of that. The other big topic I had two more, but we'll stick with the AFC here first. Going into this playoff, who do you think the Steelers' best matchup would be? I already said the Dolphins. Do you agree, or do you think it would be someone else?
I honestly, with how they're playing recently, it's a coin toss as to who the right matchup would be, because I think they can equally struggle and play with anyone within the playoff bracket. I mean, obviously Kansas City, they're going to struggle. I think they're going to struggle with Buffalo with as hot as they've been playing recently.
Well, that's one of my things. To me, the Steelers getting the Dolphins as like a best case scenario, I think also helps them out, because that means that the Titans are going to have to play the Ravens. And the Ravens are a team, like, I don't want the Steelers' depleted linebacker core to have to stop Derrick Henry. Like, are you kidding me? If that would be the draw, I know they wouldn't play them until later. But, I mean, there is a chance that, like, if they would win and the Bills would get upset. And then that's where I'm also looking at the Colts. If the Colts do win in that scenario and they get in over the Browns, I mean, the Browns did beat them, so they do have that tiebreaker. Maybe Rudolph can lead them to a win and get the Browns out of there. I mean, the Browns just lost to the Jets. They should have had this locked up, if we're being honest. So I'm not putting it past the Steelers' backup, Rudolph, to go out there and get a win. I mean, remember last year he got hit in the head with that helmet? Like,
yeah,
that's one of the teams that have been able to beat no matter what. And it would be a crazy collapse if the Browns were eliminated, because I think the Colts, just with Phillip Rivers, could give the Bills problems. And so getting rid of some of those teams, but then again, you have to look at it, which team would give the Chiefs those same problems in the second round. If the Bills were to win, the Steelers could possibly end up playing the Chiefs in that second round. Or actually, no, I don't think they could. They would end up playing them in the championship, probably no matter what, I believe. But they could end up playing the Bills, where if the Bills are eliminated, the Steelers could drop out, play someone else. It'd be nice if somehow the Ravens would line up against the Chiefs in the second round. But now I'm going through scenarios in my head, and I know they're not making sense. So I don't know. My initial thought is get the Dolphins, get the Ravens to play the Titans and lock that out. And potentially, I mean, I think for the Ravens to have to play the Chiefs, though, the Steelers would have to play the Bills.
But I don't
know if I'd want to see that.
And I don't even know that the Titans playing the Ravens helps, because I think that the more film starting to get out on the Ravens and Lamar Jackson, and I feel like you're starting to see that he's not running as wild as he was even a year ago.
I'm not even just focused on him. I don't know if the Titans have shown me anything that makes me confident that they can have the coaching staff to get them through in the postseason. Like, they have a big offense just based around running. If they're not able to move the ball, like, they're losing to the Browns in the regular season as the Browns are struggling. They're losing. Like, they lost to the Steelers and the Bengals. Like, you can't lose to losing teams like that in the heart of your season. They had double-digit loss to the Colts before going back and beating them by double digits. Like, they're just very hot or cold. Getting killed by Green Bay, like, I was not surprised with that. They couldn't do anything, and that's where I think, as a team that's starting to get cold, the Ravens going up against them, I think the Ravens would give the Chiefs a better match. The Chiefs like to play fast. I know they think they have the book on Lamar Jackson, but if he were to get his first like big, deep playoff run, the Chiefs would probably give him enough opportunities to make a big stage showing for himself. The Titans are just going to pound the ball, try to run it out, shorten the game, and I think that does hurt him. So we'll see what happens. Anything else you have on the AFC?
No, not
All
so
right.
much with the AFC.
NFC stuff. Kamara, I put us on here because for fantasy football players, his 6-touchdown night was ridiculous. In our league, it ended up being 55 points. We play PPR, so it might be a little different for everyone else. But 6 touchdowns on Christmas, a miracle. And I saw someone talking about it from ESPN. They were saying that they still have McCaffrey as the number 1 running back going into fantasy for next year. There's zero chance that I would draft McCaffrey because he's been hurt all year. He's been having weird nagging injuries, which makes me think that they're just resting him. Like he's had a hamstring injury. He hasn't come back through the last couple weeks. They're just going to try to rest him coming through. But I don't know how you wouldn't take Derrick Henry or Kamara over him, number 1 next year. That's my early thought on it. But just in terms of upside and getting it done, I mean, that was a big performance. And I think that's the reason why the Saints have been able to keep it together, because they have a dynamic running back like that.
Huh, imagine that.
You know what? It also reminded me because you had messaged me about Matt Stafford making the Hall of Fame. And I wonder, almost like, because people are saying, well, Drew Brees is a lock because of all these regular season stats. The guy won 1 Super Bowl. All he has are regular season stats. Matt Stafford's kind of in the same boat, except he hasn't had weapons like Drew Brees has had. Like, you can almost say that Drew Brees has been wasting Kamara. It would be like Matt Stafford playing with Barry Sanders if he had been on a team with weapons. I know he had Calvin Johnson for a while, but that was it. Like, they didn't even have like, you look at some of the receivers that the Steelers have put together, like on the field at the same time, like Mike Wallace, Antonio Brown, even like with Juju, Antonio Brown, and some of them, like, yeah, they're not specifically ones, but like the Steelers have been hitting on big time playmakers. The Lions really haven't. I know they have Golladay, but outside of that, like the Saints have had just dynamic offensive options. I mean, even Murray's their backup. He's a legitimate running back threat. Why? Why would you not take a deeper look at Drew Brees' career? Because he's almost like a reverse Peyton Manning. Let's say if he would have lost that Super Bowl and got one later in his career, like, would people think of him differently? I don't know.
I think possibly. It's just for those guys that were able to win it, though. I think it takes that pressure off, that you don't have to question, well, I wonder what would have happened if, because you already know that they were able to end up winning. And I think if you have those guys that are on the bubble, like, if you're questioning, like, do you put Drew Brees in? He only has regular season stats. You can always point to, well, he has the Super Bowl. Just like for as many stats and stuff as Dan Marino has, everyone always comes back to that, well, he never won a Super Bowl, so is it really worthy?
Well, that's the one thing that I'm wondering why some, like, writers, sports writers, they always move the bar. Like, for Dan Marino, it was always like, well, he didn't win, he didn't have the team. Okay, well, either does Matt Stafford. I know Marino went further in the playoffs a lot more than him. Like, they've never even made...
Hell, he made it to the Super Bowl.
Yeah, I was going to say, Stafford hasn't even made it to the championship game, I don't think.
No.
But on that same side of it, you're looking at people discrediting then what Eli Manning's doing. Like, Eli Manning played less years, so I don't know if you did like the average of what his passing is compared to Drew Brees, but he has 2 Super Bowls in a shorter career, and he has some of the things. I know Stafford, he might not have like a top 10 career yet. We don't know. He's 16th right now. He's 4 years younger than Aaron Rodgers, or at least coming into the year. I don't know age-wise. So But just even compared to like a guy like Carson Palmer's 14th. He hasn't really won anything. I wouldn't put him in the Hall of Fame. If Stafford's able to, though, pass up a bunch of legendary quarterbacks, like someone said that he's on pace to be a top 5 passing leader, that would put him ahead of Dan Marino. I think at that point, you're in. I don't care if you don't have. How are you not getting the extra yards from like the playoffs into your stats and then still being a top 5 quarterback? Just doesn't make sense to me. So, I don't know. That was kind of off topic. But just comparing like the Drew Brees and even the Aaron Rodgers, it's like right now, one of you show me something. If Tom Brady comes in to the NFC, it's looking like it's lining up exactly how I've been predicting it for the past 3 or 4 weeks. They're going to play the NFC East team in the first round. You would almost have to say that's going to be a win. That gives them one more week of kind of just like getting those younger guys into the playoffs, teaching them how to win with Tom Brady, getting them some winning playoff experience, because those guys don't have it. Tampa Bay hasn't made the playoffs for a year. And then they're going to play probably, I guess it just depends on how it shakes out, but like they could get the Seahawks if all the 1 seeds win, something like that, a winnable game in round 2. Or no, they'd be playing the Packers. I guess it depends on how it shake out. I don't know. We'll have to see on how the playoffs, because I know looking at the playoff picture, it's weird because of how they're going to reshift it, just because of that first game. But unless the Rams, who have been flailing, and Goff with his thumb injury, he's supposed to be out, I would think Tampa Bay is going to be locked into that 4-5 matchup with Washington. Or could be the Giants, could be the Cowboys. Does anyone want to win that division?
Yes, Washington.
Well, which coaching job do you think would be more impressive? Ron Rivera there? Or McCarthy with the Cowboys and Dak going out?
Well, being that Washington's on its 3rd quarterback this season, and the fact that Rivera has them even remotely close to being competitive, I think it goes to Washington.
But I would say that Alex Smith is a better quarterback than what Dalton is.
Well, then I'll say this.
Because you could say third-string quarterback, but...
Well, when you look straight up at the roster, which one has more weapons at their disposal? You know, you look at
the Cowboys.
You look at what Cowboys have. They have more weapons at their disposal. They should be better. Jerry Jones, and again, Jerry Jones is an owner that he's willing to go out and get the players that he needs to be successful. You know, he traded for Amari Cooper last year and was able to make some things happen. It's like the talent is there to win right now, where Rivera is in the process of drafting and acquiring his guys.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, it's a division that if Rivera gets his guys in there, and I've seen a lot of people, might as well talk about the next topic. So Washington released Dwayne Haskins. He had the mask thing. He was at the strip club. Apparently, they gave him a chance. I mean, obviously they gave him a chance. It's been like a week or two since that to come out to kind of own it and show that he's a leader. He didn't do it. So they just cut him. And then all the NFL teams, for people that don't know how it works, I believe there's a waiver. So all 31 teams have a chance in order to kind of go through and say if they want to claim him at his current contract. So he's in his second year. I'm not sure. I mean, it was a big contract. It was a first-round pick. So they all passed. Of course, no one's going to take that contract. So now he's out. Whatever guaranteed money he has, I think that's all he gets paid. So He pretty much threw away millions of dollars. And now he's free to renegotiate. I don't know if it's a rookie contract, but realistically, you only have 1.5 years of service. You're trying to get a big-time contract. It's not going to happen. So he kind of wasted his entire career. I mean, anyone looking at an Ohio State quarterback, I just think you have to look at the past. They've never had a successful one in the NFL, Matt. So Is it a system? People
I
always
agree.
talk about my man Mike Leach, and is it a system QB? But look at what Urban Meyer put together, because there's been some rumors that he's going to jump to the NFL potentially. 2 teams have been interested in him.
Well, it makes sense.
But,
He's great at paying players.
Matt, he's a system guy producing these system quarterbacks. Which quarterback has had success from him in the NFL? Is Tim Tebow the only one? I guess Alex Smith.
I hope he goes to the NFL. He can be just like your boy Steve Spurrier. He can go to the NFL. He can get all his system guys. They can all stink and be 4-6. He can just have heart palpitations and quit.
Well, I told you, because on the big time, it would be outrageous if he went to the Jaguars, locked up Trevor Lawrence, instead traded him for more picks and brought in Haskins. Like, people would go nuts. I would love it, because then it would line up. If Harbaugh signs his extension, he bows out after 2 years. Urban Meyer fails in the NFL in a year or two.
Cardell Jones
does his Nick Saban impression.
Well, he could sign all of the Ohio State quarterbacks because they're all free agents right now. He could bring them all in.
He can just do the Nick Saban. Go to the NFL, fail for a year. Then, of course, he has to go to a rival school to redeem himself. So he goes to Michigan and establishes a dynasty, Matt.
Wow. If he had his pick, he's old. He's going to go somewhere warm.
No,
he's not going to want to go to Michigan where it's cold.
He's going to have to pick a rival. That's what Nick Saban did. He was at LSU, failed to the NFL, had to go to Alabama to bring them back up because his legacy's hurt. If he goes to the NFL and fails, Urban Meyer's a big legacy guy. I mean, you can tell based on even
he could just write another book about how tough it is in the NFL.
He's already said about how he's a legacy guy. He wants success at the big programs. He had already picked out Michigan, Notre Dame, and Ohio State as his 3 programs where he knew that he would be a legend if he was able to win there. If he goes to the NFL and fails,
he'll just be
all that Ohio State stuff,
speculation.
It goes out the window, Matt. Goes out the window. If Ohio State gets killed by Clemson again in the playoffs, then what happens? Like, you're telling me, speaking of Ohio State quarterbacks, Fields didn't look good at all against Northwestern, running that same system. Do you really think if a team, because I saw potentially the Steelers might be interested in him, do you think that that's going to turn around? I think that'd be another bust. I don't think there's any upside.
No. If they were going to take a flyer on a quarterback like that, I would want them to take and now I'm going to draw a blank, the quarterback that's at North Dakota State right now. He's going to be coming out.
Yeah, we talked about him last week. He might be too high.
That would be the one that if they feel like they have to take a quarterback, that would be the one that I would be willing to take a flyer on.
No, you're not. Your man, Kyle Trask, Matt.
Or Malik Willis.
No, you were going to say Kyle Trask.
No, see, it's so close to trash that you don't even have to say it.
No, I'm having you come around on the Trask idea.
Why? So we can just have multiple quarterbacks that suck? Just have Roethlisberger until he's 85 years old quarterback? Like, is that your game plan?
No, you need a quarterback that has some type of confidence. Look at what Baker Mayfield's done. I know he hasn't made the playoffs yet, but he kind of turned around the Browns a little bit. They're perennial losers. Ben Roethlisberger, do we even know he cares?
No, he doesn't, which is why he wins. He just goes out there and just runs around and lets people bounce off and then throws it 30 yards.
I mean, our most confident quarterback last year was Duck. Trask has more talent. If he can take that confidence, a Duck-Trask combo, I'd like that.
Yeah, they all stink. Be better off with my arm with tendonitis right now.
Looking around the other NFC stuff, I mean, if I'm looking at this just in terms of which team's going to come out, and let's say the Chiefs come out of the AFC, I think the Chiefs repeat. I don't see any team other than possibly a Tom Brady Buccaneers that could give them a consistent game. The Packers have been so hot and cold, though, that if they come out and Aaron Rodgers isn't throwing interceptions, they could potentially give them fits. But I haven't seen it from him in over a decade now. So do I have confidence in that? No. But we'll see what happens. Do you have anything else on the NFC?
You're saying Tampa Bay. I could see New Orleans being a team that, with Kamara's touchdowns, I could see that being something, because I don't know that for as much offense as they're bringing, I don't know that Tampa's going to be able to match what they're putting out.
I don't know. In terms of putting stuff together, I know they blew the
take
Buccaneers
this into
out
consideration.
twice.
They're doing a lot of it without Michael Thomas, and to be able to get him back at full health, there's an additional weapon that they haven't had. And knowing that a Super Bowl ring's on the line,
well, I don't even know if they'd have to play them. I mean, the Saints haven't really made deep playoff runs anyway,
except when they won the Super Bowl.
Yeah, that one time.
All it takes is one time.
It all depends on the matchups. So we'll know next week's show who's playing when we focus on the first week. Like, I'd already say the Buccaneers, and if the Packers get the bye, those are the two teams I know for sure that are going through. I'd be shocked if they lost. And then, of course, the Chiefs. And then we'll see on the AFC side going through. I did have one other thing on the NFL, though, because I mentioned Matt Stafford making the Hall of Fame. I think our text kind of diverged because one of the ESPN guys, I think, they were actually talking about Matt Stafford making the Hall of Fame compared to Frank Gore's career. And I'm a big Frank Gore fan. I know he had some injuries and stuff. But in terms of longevity at the running back position, he's an instant Hall of Famer for me. I mean, he's proven it multiple franchises. He's come in, led the 49ers to a Super Bowl, went to the Colts, had success there. Then he where else was he? Was he at Buffalo? Now he's with the Jets. And like, no matter what team they put him behind, and they're like, oh, he's just going to be a guy on the team. He ends up being one of their leading rushers. And so in terms of, oh, he has all these stats, but it's like, but what? He's a running back. Like, you're not the quarterback I can see tying wins to, but if you start looking at other positions and saying, well, he didn't win enough, it's like you're one guy. Like Derrick Henry, if he doesn't win with the Titans, are you going to blame it on him? Or are you going to blame it on them not having a extraordinary quarterback? They have a good quarterback right now. We don't know how good he can be in the playoffs. I mean, he was with the Dolphins, hasn't really done anything in his career. But are you going to blame that on Henry? Like, at some point, it's easier to shut you down in the playoffs or if you're the only dimension. So I would say Gore in 100%. The Stafford, even like the Eli stuff, you're a quarterback, they're going to look at your win-loss record and some of the other things impact to the game. But I would say for running back, in a position where they say the average career is 3 years, if you're building up stats, it's because you're good enough to play that long. And that's a Hall of Famer to me. What's your thoughts?
I have mixed feelings with it because when Emmitt Smith set the rushing record, it left a little bit of a sour taste just because of how long it took for him to do it in the same time frame that it took Walter Payton, and not just being that, the football snob in me said, obviously it took Payton fewer games and did it at a much higher, much better level. But it's like, or are you awarding people based off of their ability just to stay healthy and stay relevant, which in today's NFL, I mean, I guess it does. It is meaningful to be able to stay relevant and just to continue playing at a rate that Frank Gore's doing it at. And I do think that he probably has a couple more years left where he can get some meaningful carries that, who knows? I mean, maybe by the time he finally does hang it up and call it a career, maybe he is pushing Emmitt Smith for that rushing record. But I just thought that it was like the same way as I was reflecting on, is Frank Gore Hall of Fame worthy, was the same rate that it was like, well, Emmitt Smith just kept hanging on until he was able to set the rushing record and then bowed out in Arizona.
Well, that's the one thing that I'm looking at, because it's kind of like the same. If you're talking in terms of like average, he's played what 15, 16 years right now. He's averaging over 1,000 yards a season. Like it's not like you're just staying healthy and you're playing like Julio Franco, where you're just getting a hit there, here or there, like 20 yards, 20 yards, 20 yards a game, and you're just playing so long that you're barely getting any carries to get hurt. Like he's putting together averages that I think rival some of the top guys in a season. And I know they're different games played, more games or whatever, but he's close. If he played next year and put another 1,000 up, he'd pass Walter Payton and be number 2 all time. What more do you want the guy to do? Like not play as long? Say like, oh yeah, that's right. You shouldn't play anymore. Like, do you cut off Tom Brady's Super Bowls once he hit 40? Like, Tom, that's enough. Please give that ring to your backup. It's like it doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah.
Because you're like, oh, how's he breaking these? Oh, he's getting 1,000 yards a season. It's like, yeah, well, I'm mad at that. Like he should be doing more. It's like, what more? Do you want him to do less? If he was 55 and he was still putting up like 200 yards a season, then I would say, all right, Frank, probably time to retire.
But every time I see someone like Frank Gore, and maybe it's partially why he did it the way he did, but it always reminds me of Barry Sanders. That I think like if Barry just continued doing what he was doing, like for another 10 years, where would the rushing, like Emmitt Smith would still have to be in the league right now to try to catch what Barry was doing, because he was literally just playing backyard football because the Lions didn't have any weapons. It was like everyone knew he was getting it, and he was still being very productive.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, if Matt Stafford had him, like, let's say he just hung on for 5 more years. I guess he played, 8 or 9 years.
Well, then, Frank Gore, you need to come to Pittsburgh. If you're still churning out 1,000-yard regular seasons and you're with the Jets right now, come to Pittsburgh.
Yeah, how many teams wouldn't have an upgrade with Frank Gore? I mean, like, the Steelers are having trouble rushing at all. Like, that would be an easy pick. Like, if they just said, like, hey, Frank Gore decided he's going to play for the Steelers in the playoff, I think every single sports writer would know that that's an upgrade. And that, to me, that's like, the guy's super old. He's going to come in and get stuff done in the playoffs. Why not? Is it because he played for 5 teams? Like Adrian Peterson played for 5 teams. He's also played for a long time. He came in 2 years after Frank. It looks like he's like 1,000 or so behind him. So they're kind of at the same level. Do you not put Adrian Peterson in if he plays for 5 more years? Like, what you just picking and choosing which guy you like better? Because the argument's the same. They both played for a ton of different teams. Like, what has been the difference? Like, did Frank Gore not lead the league in rushing? I'm sure he has a ton of Pro Bowls. I just don't know what they want from the guy. Because there's some of that Pro Bowl stuff and the voting stuff, let's be honest, it's a popularity contest. So some of the writing stuff, I think that's so outdated with social media and everything today. Like in 10 or 20 years, people are going to look back and laugh. Kind of like the college football, like we always joke about national champions. Like, oh yeah, that was from so-and-so pool. That's a joke now. Because you didn't have the computers or this or that. It's like looking back and you'd be like, that's how you picked the Pro Bowl? What a joke. That's how you picked league MVP? Just randomly pick the guy? Like just put a vote on. Make it fan vote. Why does it have to be these writers? It just doesn't make sense to me. So, anything else you got for the NFL?
No.
I did have some other random stuff before I get into college football. The NFL crushed the NBA on Christmas. Remember how everyone talks about like, oh, Christmas is the NBA's day? They have all these best matchups. Like it was like a 4 times more viewers for the NFL. And so that's where because we've talked about college football, their viewership's down. A bunch of the bowl games getting canceled. It can't help. And that's why it baffled me whenever they put like Liberty and Coastal Carolina on when they did. Like I know the Bulls have been getting canceled, but you would have thought that it turned out to be an outstanding game, which everyone knew that it would be. And they're just, oh, well, let's just throw it on before Christmas or anything because, people would rather watch Texas, Colorado. Maybe they would. We'll see what the ratings are going to be. But even like BYU, their beatdown of UCF, it was like that was the best matchup you could find for BYU. Why not put them against what was Army 9-2? They couldn't find a bowl game. You don't think BYU and 9-2 Army would have been a better game? More people would have watched, give better national credibility. But I think someone like the old systems, they're definitely out to get it. I think the only negative is that Coastal Carolina didn't pull off the win so that they could claim a national championship. If Liberty wouldn't have lost the game, because I had been calling for, I hope Liberty goes undefeated. They lost by 1 point at NC State. Because it wasn't like a blowout, but people would just read and say, oh, they lost to NC State, like they're out. If they would have won that game, Liberty could be claiming a national championship, which would be making like Ole Miss fans' heads just explode. But that's the system with college football. And so now I used to be against like, oh, let's just get the playoffs expanded or whatever. And let's see, because I really didn't like 18 playoff. So I thought maybe if you make it to 12, I don't like buys though either. Maybe 16. I think that would be it. But I've seen people propose that there's been a push now for them to mimic what has happened in like the other divisions where it's like a 2014 playoff in line with like the other NCAA sports. Because I think NCAA, you have to have so many teams have a chance to win the championship for it to actually count as a national championship or something. So I've seen a couple of proposals come out. And at first I'm like, well, that's kind of dumb. That's already too many games. You're going to add 24. You're going to get bye games in. But if it's going to get me more games like Liberty and Coastal Carolina that count, because even at a 16-team playoff, both of those teams wouldn't be there. Liberty would be forced to be in another conference. They would be playing Texas or someone right now instead. And so if that's going to be the play-in game to a playoff in the future, go for it. Because that's what I want to see. I want to see some of these schools have a chance. And you can't tell me that they won't. Look at basketball. I mean, some of these games, it's like not even interesting at all. Why not let the smaller ones play? Buffalo had a great game against Marshall. They would be 6-1. I know it's not as big as like Liberty's 10-1 season. But why not? Why not put them into the next round? And if these schools are so less talented than the big schools, then like I had always said, shouldn't it just be a technical like bye for them? Wouldn't it just be a tune-up game for Alabama to blow Liberty out? Or is Alabama really scared that Liberty or BYU or one of these smaller teams could beat them?
Well, I would think, being that Hugh Freeze was on the coach at Ole Miss whenever they had one of those wins, that he would be afraid to play Liberty because Hugh Freeze actually has been a coach who has actually beaten Nick Saban. So it makes sense.
And that's my whole point. I think the bigger teams are scared. And that's why I don't want to see, if you go to an 18 playoff, that's going to push back an expanded playoff for what? Another decade at least? The playoff as it is right now has been in place for years. So it's not like a fast moving thing. So if these smaller conferences can get some type of legislation drawn up to try to push the NCAA to finally step in, as states are paying players, because Michigan passed a thing to go with Florida. I think they're the first two states, I don't know if I missed any, that they're going to start letting players make money in the next year or two, maybe 3. I don't know how long it takes for that law to kick in. But you would have to think that if you're a fan of a school in one of those states, that you're at an advantage right now, and the other states are just hoping the NCAA approves it. Because if not, there's no way Ohio is going to let Michigan State and Michigan just pay their players. And if you're a Clemson fan, there's no way you're going to let Florida State start letting their players make extra money on the side. Recruiting would just crater. Because you'd be like, yeah, you can go play for one of those schools, but are you going to actually make money? What if you get hurt? You could have some money here. We have autograph day. You can make $1,000 in one day. Just sitting here signing some autographs. Like players would be signed up. So I'm wondering if that's going to change the dynamic. And if that does, let some of these smaller schools get back into the game. Because bowl season right now hasn't been as big for me this year. I really want to love it like in past years. But with all the cancellations and stuff, I'm just not feeling it. Like the Oklahoma State-Miami game, zero reason to play that. Was it a good game? Yes.
It was a great game.
But for what? What did they win for that? A year's worth of Cheez-Its, Matt?
Well, I mean,
would you buy a Cheez-It Bowl T-shirt? If that was Florida State instead of Oklahoma State and they won that, would you buy a Cheez-It Bowl 2020 Champs T-shirt?
Oh, yeah. I would be.
Because you know it doesn't matter.
Well, no, I mean, I watched the Orange Bowl when Florida State beat Michigan, and I didn't go out and get an Orange Bowl T-shirt from that victory.
Yeah, another game that didn't matter.
So unless you're in one of the unless you're in one of the 4 playoff spots, the rest of those bowls don't matter. I think part of this is you're missing out is that when you qualify for a bowl as a college program, you get the additional practices. So all through the. But
as a fan, that doesn't matter.
But it matters because when your team doesn't make a bowl, and then you're done, and then you're stuck in a perpetual cycle of suck. Then, yeah, it does matter. When you have those couple extra weeks of practicing where the players are at the facility, where they're able to be with the strength coaches, where they're in a routine, where they're able to do more stuff, and you get more player development, success breeds success. You're going to get more on that. That's why a lot of these teams that are making bowl games and having consistency at that level, that's why it continues, because they have that opportunity. And, you know, for someone who's, as a college football fan, has been very spoiled, it's been very difficult watching Florida State not make bowls. And one of the things that was brought up was the fact that it's important to qualify for the bowl so that you get the extra practice. You have that extra time with the team. Whereas if you don't and the season ends, then they're home like every other student, eating grandma's cooking and getting fat and not being and putting unnecessary weight on. That hurts them going into spring practices.
I don't know. I used to believe that, but the more and more I watch this, I think that some of that is just a myth. Like, I think the extra practices a way for coaches that are mediocre to push that their team is getting better. Like, look, we really eked out a win over 4-6 Kentucky. Like, I'm just looking at the games for this weekend. Like, NC State's playing Kentucky. If they push that out, is NC State going to be any better next week or next year if they beat Kentucky? Like, no. I think it comes down to, yeah, you can get some extra practices, but you're still practicing with players that aren't going to be there. And if you had a system in place, you would win without it. And I think the big thing that really proves my point is look how many coaches come in brand new and are able to take teams that didn't get a bowl game, didn't get those extra practices, and make them look like a heavy-hitting competitive team that just outshines their regular performance. And how are they able to do that? Because they just bring a different mindset in and actually had players competing. Like, if you have extra practices of shit, you're still going to be shit next year. Like, if you're having 7-win practices and then you play in a 7-win bowl game, even if you win or lose, those practices aren't helping you. Like, if you were cutting seniors out for these other bowls and making it, because I would be for that. If you don't make the playoffs, seniors are done. The bowl game is like an exhibition to get ready for next year. If that's what you're pushing for it, then do it. All the seniors get to play in the Senior Bowl. They already have like 3 or 4 different Senior Bowls anyway. So they just go to that game instead. Then I could say, all right, now you have a point. It's giving these guys a chance to play together. But like the Cotton Bowl, Florida versus Oklahoma, do you think that's going to help recruiting? No. Oklahoma has 2 losses. Florida has 3. And the people are going to watch that game. They're not going to say, you know what? I really want to play for Oklahoma. They're either going to like Oklahoma from before, or they're going to like the coach or some other connection. Those extra practices aren't going to help Florida. Like Kyle Trask is getting ready to show off for the NFL. If he has a poor game and Florida comes back, I don't think there's a bump. I honestly think that that's a thing that you hear from football programs that everyone's just been saying for years. Like, oh, we need the extra practices. We need the extra practices. It's like if you needed them, win your conference. Win your conference next year. But you're not seeing improvement. All these bowl games that are being played, teams are still getting worse and worse. Doesn't matter.
Well, here's one for you that they just showed this stat. The Texas captains from the first game, they had 7 players highlighted. Their quarterback, Sam Ehlinger, is the only one who was active tonight for their bowl game against Colorado. So where you're saying about how a lot of these older guys, and I do think when you're looking at the people declaring for the draft and opting out because of COVID, this bowl game and these extra practices do mean more because you're looking at out of 7, you got 1 that's actually still playing tonight.
That's just one small sample, though. Like, I think it would be universal. Like, if you play in your bowl game, and I'm saying outside of the playoffs, like, let's say this keeps continuing, because I know the bowl games, they don't get the big-time ratings, but they get enough for ESPN to make it worth it. Because, like I said, football beats the NBA anyway. They'd rather just have Cheez-It pay for some bowl game, they're the advertiser for the entire game. And so people are going to watch. It's probably cheaper for Cheez-It to do that than run ads on like the Super Bowl or something. So why not just go ahead and have the games, but just make them like amateur exhibitions, which they already are. You already have people opting out. The NCAA could step in and say, look, if you're going to the NFL, you're ineligible to play. You got to play in one of the other Senior Bowl or NFL draft bowls that they're already out there. But you're not going to come in and try to make a decision after the game. You have to decide before. If you come back, you're locked in for the next year or whatever. And I think the NFL could probably agree to that and say, like, look, we've had too many players hit or miss. And so if they want to move on or transfer or whatever, do it before the bowl game. Like Ehlinger, what does him playing in this game have anything to do to help Texas next year if he's not going to be there? Which I think he can come back because of the COVID stuff. So this year is probably a little bit different to look at this. But you're saying like, oh, it's a reward for Louisiana Tech to get crushed by Georgia Southern 38-3 because of their seniors get to play in one more game. Like what was rewarding about that? Like you can say Israel Tucker, like, yeah, you had a 100-yard game. But other than that, it's like, did you have fun playing that? Probably not. You got killed. And is anyone going to look at Louisiana Tech and say, oh, I was a big fan of them in that R&L Carriers New Orleans Bowl? I went out and bought a hat and a T-shirt. I'm a big fan now. Like, no. Like, give these smaller schools a chance in the playoffs and then use the other bowls as like an exhibition or just get rid of them. Because you're rewarding teams and it's only for money at this point. Like Wake Forest, Wisconsin, awesome. Really excited to watch that game tomorrow. Not. Iowa, Missouri canceled. They just put themselves out of their misery. Because that's a lose-lose for Iowa. You either beat up on a poor Missouri team, or worst case, you lose to them. You lose to Missouri, how is the extra practice helping you, Matt?
But they probably wouldn't. I would have bet on Iowa.
Probably. You don't know, though. The Kirk Ferentz special, he always chokes every once in a while. But that's my beef. Like you're saying that some of these teams can't compete with the big boys, but then you're not really giving them a chance in the bowl games. Like you're not giving Army a fair shake. They had to wait for Tennessee to drop out to play 5-4 West Virginia, What type of reward is that for Army? They're 9-2. Like, if you were actually putting together bowl matchups based on merit instead of conference tie-ins, then I could see that. Because when people say, like, oh, go back to the old bowl system, West Virginia and Tennessee weren't locked into that game. 9-2 Army would have played another 9-2 or above team. Like, they might have had their crack at 11-1 or I guess 10-1 BYU at the time. But that's not the system anymore. The system's been ruined. Now, like, oh, Army, you might have a chance if one of the teams drops out. We can give you a shot. It's like, what? Get out of here. That's my thing. Like, Arkansas TCU was canceled. I saw people were upset about that. I was like, why? Arkansas's 3-7. Do they need to be in a bowl game? Like, people like Dabo Swinney's making fun of Ohio State for only playing 6 games. Like, what was one more game for Arkansas? Like, what would that do for them? Nothing. Does Georgia need a chance against Cincinnati on Friday? Like, you're helping Georgia stay relevant by playing Cincinnati. That's only going to help their recruiting. It's not going to help Cincinnati's recruiting. That's my negative take on the bowl season this year.
But Cincinnati's still one of the undefeated teams, so beat Georgia, claim your banner. You know, we said the same thing with Coastal Carolina. Had they have knocked off Liberty, raise the banner. If you're San Jose State, you're undefeated. You win your bowl game against Ball State, raise your banner. You know,
that's why it was ballsy of BYU to fly across the country to play Coastal Carolina. But if they don't do that, they're 11-0. They could have claimed the national championship. And they only did that as a chance to try to get in the playoffs. Let's be honest, they weren't getting in anyway. If they beat Coastal Carolina, they're probably playing, like, they might be playing in Georgia or playing Georgia in that bowl instead of Cincinnati. Like, what kind of reward is that? It's not.
And you know that was one of those games from earlier in the year. Like, Coastal and Liberty were supposed to play earlier in the year and ended up getting canceled. And BYU stepped in to fill that game. So that was a good game earlier in the year that wound down to that was originally slated to be the Liberty Coastal game. That had they have played that then, you wouldn't have seen that during bowl season. So I thought that was kind of a cool thing that they were able to get that matchup. And
but I'll say the opposite though. What if, because I had put this ahead earlier in the year, what if with COVID they knew that there was going to be cancellations? What if Cincinnati, undefeated, BYU doesn't play that game, they're undefeated, Coastal Carolina's undefeated, and then they find one more team, whether it be, like, you can invite the 9-2 Army,
Jose State.
You can get Liberty. What was the other undefeated one you said?
San Jose State.
San Jose State. And you just say, like, look, we're going to do our own 14 playoff, and we're going to claim national champs. We're going to play this first before Christmas week. So, like, instead of BYU playing UCF, maybe they lose that game to Coastal Carolina now. And then Coastal Carolina's playing in another game that has been canceled. Like, what if the Texas Bowl then just becomes the other national championship on New Year's Eve? Like, I would have to think that a ton of people would be watching that. I know New Year's Eve haven't been good for ratings, but how many other games are canceled? There's a New Year's game, the Birmingham Bowl. That could have been the new national championship. Like, why not? Let's see what happens. Are people going to go ahead and are they going to watch that game? Or are they going to watch some other game? I mean, that's against the playoffs, though, so it probably wouldn't have mattered. You'd had to try to match it up, so, like, maybe throw a game on Saturday, January 2nd. Like, would people be watching A&M play North Carolina at 8? Or would they be watching the other national championship game? Because I'd be watching the championship game. So that's my thing. I think some of these other conferences should just get together and say, like, look, we're already delivering ratings for bowl season as it is. Let's just claim our own national championship. Like, what's going to happen? The NCAA is going to say, no, don't do that. And they're going to say, like, look, we don't have a chance for it. You're not letting us in the other one. And do you think those bigger schools like Alabama are going to let a smaller team be named co-national champs every year? And not every year is going to have undefeated teams. I get that.
Well, I think that's the argument, is that for as much sand as was kicked up about UCF's claimed national championship, it hasn't happened consistently. Yeah, you could have made the call for Coastal, but they lost one in their bowl game. And could you make it for Cincinnati if they win their game? Possibly. Could you do it when San Jose State wins? I mean, me and you make the jokes about it all the time. We could have 3 national champions this year. Maybe that's what it takes to break the system and get them where they need to be.
And I don't know. It just depends on how much it bothers people. Like the UCF one, I think really bothered Alabama fans. I'm sure that it bothered Nick Saban, because at that point you could say, like, look, we're undefeated, you're not. Like, play us. And then, of course, Alabama's not going to take that risk, because if they take that and lose, what happens? Like, the whole system is just laughed at them. So, I mean, going back, you could even look at, like, the 2011 season, which I brought up Mike Gundy earlier. Mike Gundy was 12-1 that year. He was named the national champion by one of the selectors that the NCAA recognizes. They could retroactively claim a national championship that year. Like, why not? Alabama was named it in 2016 after losing their only game to Clemson. And I think it was at one of those nail-biter years. So if you're looking at the whole body of work, why not? But I think the big thing is, normally teams don't go undefeated. But in this college bowl system, like within the past decade, most teams usually have no losses or one loss. And I think that's what's hurting these smaller schools. They're not able to do the same. Like San Jose, they could claim it, but they only played 7 games. This will be their 8th game. And you could say, like, okay, national champs, but that to me, that's different than like Cincinnati. Cincinnati could have a chance to be. Did they play their conference championship though, or did that one get canceled? I can't remember.
I don't know off the top of my head.
I'll see if I could find it, because that's the one. They're only 9-0. So that's another one where they started late. It was canceled, but they did end up replaying it, or they played one of them. So like they canceled one of the Tulsa games, played it for the championship. They also canceled the Temple game. And so that's another one where you're like, okay, they only have 9 wins. So I don't know where it goes from here, but just the fact that some of the other conferences are going to get together and say, like, look, at some point, are you paying us like extra to take these beatings? Because that's what the smaller schools usually do. And I would think that they would have a point. Like, you're taking the money for the TV rights for all of this, and the NCAA tournament, they split all that money anyway based on how many teams you get in from the conference. So I think it would ultimately work out if you're getting the at-large bids. It might hurt some conferences like the Pac-12 if they're having a bad year, just because I don't think they get a lot of big-name brand following on the East Coast. But are they really making a difference now anyway? I don't know. Looking at this, though, I didn't realize Kyle Whittingham was the coach at Utah in 2008 when they went undefeated. Because he could claim one. That was before they went to the Pac-12.
Claim it.
And Gary Patterson at TCU that year, they went 13-0.
Claim it.
But in the past, when a team won undefeated, they just got invited to a bigger conference. That was like their prize a decade ago. Now UCF, they're like, yeah, we'll never invite you. Like, go back down to Florida. Go to Disney and celebrate there. We don't want you. So,
but I wonder how much. But you know, that's always one of those where they're at now. And I think if they were able to redo it again, and Heupel stays where he's at and was like build something longer term, I would think that UCF would have the opportunities to move into a bigger Power 5 program. Like they would be accepted into one of the Power 5s, I would think.
Well, it just depends on how big they want to get. Because I think the sport's basically, killing itself with the 14 playoff. And so there's only 3 or 4 paths they could go. If they want to keep it how it is, you almost have to just jump to a 16-team playoff and have automatic conference qualifiers. If you go to 8 and you have the Power 5 automatically qualify and then only pick one other like special team, like how do you get it if you have a 2-team year like a couple years ago when they had like the TCU and the Boise? Or like this year you have Coastal Carolina or BYU. If they don't play each other, or Cincinnati, I guess. Like who do you put in? You just pick Cincinnati because? Like, oh yeah, Cincinnati's a bigger school because of basketball, so we're going to pick them? Like I think
the higher ranked.
Yeah, but who's picking the ranking? Like going back to the computer polls or what? Like I think that's going to be the deciding factor. And I think that just causes more questions. And then you have a team that's going to get left out because they're independent, or like I think the one thing that would really push it through is if Army or Navy went undefeated. Because they have the history of winning national championships. That's why I was really pulling for BYU. BYU is a national champion in the past 30 years. A lot of schools can't say that. Or is it 40 by now? No, 30. Maybe it is 40. I don't know. But in recent times, they were national champs. And a lot of schools haven't been that. And so that would have gave a lot of just...
I want to say BYU's last one was like in 84.
Yeah. I know. So it has to be like in the last 40 years because it wasn't in my lifetime. But that was the one where they're recently winning national champs. If they would have been left out this year, I know they were hoping that they could just beat Coastal Carolina on a short week. And then what? Then they might have been able to name one this year and put that spotlight on it. But by losing that one game, everyone was kind of like, yep, see, they don't deserve it. So I don't know. But I think if they don't expand, then what's going to happen is it's going to turn into like a college football, like is just an NFL minor league, where, like you saying, you're going to have 4 major conferences because with the 14 playoff, someone's going to get left out. There's not enough money to feed 5 conferences and then have one not make the playoffs. There's just not. So I think the conferences will start to expand. Whichever conference ends up getting torn apart, right now it looks like it's either going to be the Pac-12 or the Big 12. Those other schools are going to be snatched up by another conference, and then that's going to be it. Like I think you're going to look at maybe 16-team conferences. Whoever that conference decides to put in is their representative, and then that's the playoff. Like if the Big Ten gets Oklahoma and Texas to go with Nebraska in that division, and then their winners play, then I think it's kind of like an 18 playoff where the one division champ plays the other one. You have the traditional Big Ten playing the other guys. Maybe, I don't know. Like does the ACC, did they reseed? Are they able to pull in Notre Dame then and have them be the other side, where in the playoffs then Notre Dame has a great chance of making it every year into the AFC or the ACC championship game, and then that's their thing? And then when they're down, maybe Virginia Tech or Pitt or someone can jump up and take it. Miami maybe. I don't know. But I think this year really is going to be the deciding factor. Because, like, what else? There's not a lot that are putting people to be like, yeah, I'm really excited about college football. I think the latest one, college football ratings are down 30% this year. So why? They were the only sport that was on. I know a lot of big name games got canceled, but a lot of the games, like I said, they didn't matter. So you're putting games up that no one cares about. There's no chance for a championship. Why would anyone watch? So I think it's killing itself, Matt. Do you have anything else on college football?
Well, I just think when you look at college football as a whole, the transfer portal is going to change a lot of these teams. And I think like we started talking a little bit about it before the show started tonight. I think when you look at, especially going into next year where a lot of players are going to be able to transfer and be eligible immediately, I think you're going to start to see that the traditional signing day rankings aren't going to have the amount of weight that they used to have, because if you have a good relationship with a potential athlete, and then the school that they sign with sells them a bill of goods and they don't end up panning out, then they can always hit the transfer portal and you could potentially end up getting players a year or two down the road filling roster spots. And I think, when you look at some of these teams that process people out, it could end up helping them. Because, you're signing a top 10 class, but if you're processing half of your classes out or 3/4 of your classes out, then, what does that class look like as you're getting people from the transfer portal in and out?
That's why I think some of the composite rankings for recruiting that we look at, they don't really look at transfers coming in. And I hope that they change that, because it would take a lot of work for just me and you to put that together, but like that's part of their whole team. Like each person or each team has like their own writer anyway. So if they were able to look at that and just take their recruiting ranking and then just balance it, I think you'd be able to see a big shift towards some of the teams that are always there, that are able to keep some of their guys. But realistically, though, you're still going to have bigger schools be able to pull in the bigger recruits from transferring. Like if it's a big time transfer guy that's going to make an impact, they're going to go to a bigger school. Look at when Ole Miss had their falling out. Where did those guys transfer? Michigan and Florida. Like it wasn't like UCF sitting there thinking, oh yeah, here we go. Like if they're going to be a big time guy, they're going to go to a big time school. Like look at where are all the other quarterback transfers going, Matt, in the past couple years? Oklahoma. Could you imagine if any of those Heisman winners went to another school? Like they're transferring from Texas Tech and they're saying like, look, I developed better than I thought I would. Oklahoma's calling me. I'm going to leave my conference school to go play at Oklahoma and win the Heisman. Like it's outrageous. It's not like it's helping Texas Tech. If it was the opposite, where like even Georgia decided that Justin Fields didn't win their quarterback battle. Where did he go? Did he go help out a smaller school? No, he just went to Ohio State. And then their quarterback transferred to Miami and now plays nothing. So, I don't know. I just don't think that it's going to balance anything. Unless you have a system in place to get some of these smaller schools that could say, like, look, you got processed out of Georgia. You could go to Ohio State or compete. Or you could come here and compete for a playoff spot. Because like that's what Mike Leach did with his quarterback, Minshew. He was transferred from East Carolina to Alabama, Matt, to be the backup. So like you're talking about guys just transferring to help other schools. Mike Leach had to talk him into it by saying like, look, you can go be a backup and then try to make the NFL that way, or I could make you be the highest rated passer in the country, and you can get drafted my way, which paid off for him. But how many other guys are just going to transfer to Alabama instead? So, I don't know. I think it's a broken system this year, being highlighted by that. I just wanted to get that off my chest. It's been annoying me. I mean, so many schools are sitting it out this year. Will it even be better next year? My final bell stuff. Coach K, I don't know if I talked about it. I know I wanted to mention it. Once Duke started losing, he started talking about their basketball season potentially being canceled. The Duke women's team just dropped out. They're done for the year. They had a new head coach, I think, in the past 2 years. I haven't followed women's basketball that much. But they just said, like, look, we're done. So for people that think March Madness is a lock, if Duke drops out, they dropped out last spring, which started everyone else dropping out. The Ivy League, I think, already dropped out, right? They're not playing sports this year.
Correct.
So if Duke men's follow the women, or like, let's say, I know people laugh, but like Kentucky's been so bad. Like if Duke drops out and then Kentucky drops out just because they're losing, I wonder if it's going to be another domino effect, which ends up taking that away, which I think would put a big hurt on some of these other conferences because they're padding up, like the Cincinnati's, they're padding up like some of the bigger time football schools, but then they'll have a chance to make their money up in the NCAA tournament. If that doesn't happen, how many other programs are going to get canceled this year? So I don't know if it's going to be a trend, but just because Duke started it and they started the one last year, it has me kind of on edge because, like, why not? Why not see what happens? Like, is it going to be something that they can play safely or not? Because sometimes I don't know at this point if they're going to or not. You have anything else for the final bell?
Yeah, I just wanted to thank everyone for continuing to support the show. We had a pretty good number of people listening and tuning in and downloading the show. It's still pretty cool that after however many years and different things we've gone through, that there's still people out there listening and keep tuning in. So thank you for your ongoing support.
Yeah, you can listen to my deranged rants on college football. But it's not like there's big games, Matt, for me to talk about. You got some backup matchups, but I'm excited for NFL. Definitely, thanks for listening to the show. Like I said, there's a newsletter sign up on our website. You can go there to get all our latest shows. I'm hoping that that's helping some of the numbers build back up because, I mean, coronavirus year has been just hard. Normally we do like a year-end review show, but there's not a lot of sports highlights this year. So we're just going to focus on next year. And hopefully Steelers go far in the playoffs and they don't cancel anything else. But thanks for listening. Go to southboundsports.com. Tell your friends about the show. We'd love to get more listeners on this. So thanks for listening. We'll see you next week.